It rises from the Giza Plateau like geometry made divine, the Great Pyramid. We know it as the tomb of Pharaoh Khufu, built 4,500 years ago, a monument where a god-king was laid to rest for eternity. It's the story taught in classrooms, written in guidebooks, accepted without question. But this story is incomplete, because when archaeologists finally translated the hieroglyphs carved inside later pyramids in the 1880s, they discovered something that transforms everything we thought we knew. The walls contained spells, resurrection formulas, instructions for stellar ascent. They read, "You shall ascend to the sky among the imperishable stars." They declared, "You are this great star, the companion of Orion." The ancient Egyptians themselves documented the truth. The pyramids were never just tombs. They were resurrection machines, precise theological instruments designed to transform a mortal king into an eternal god. This is not speculation. It is written in stone, encoded in geometry, aligned with the stars. The evidence spans architecture, astronomy, sacred texts, and religious ritual. Every element of the pyramid, from its shape to its internal shafts to its placement on the western bank of the Nile, follows a strict religious blueprint rooted in Egyptian cosmology. We will trace the documented evidence of this religious code. We will explore how the pyramid's triangular form recreates the primordial mound of creation, how narrow shafts align with Orion, the god of resurrection, how the entire Giza Plateau functions as a cosmic map of Egyptian theology, how the pyramid texts explicitly describe the king's transformation into a luminous, eternal being. This is the story of a civilization that encoded its deepest religious beliefs into the largest structures ever built. A civilization that believed order conquers chaos, light conquers darkness, and death is not an end, but transformation. If you're fascinated by ancient civilizations and the beliefs that shape them, hit that like button and subscribe. The visuals are here for context, but they aren't necessary to follow along. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what hidden histories you want us to explore next. You're about to discover how ancient Egyptians turned theological conviction into architectural reality. Let's begin. As the first thing you need to understand is this. The ancient Egyptians were explicit about what pyramids were for. Unlike modern archaeological mysteries, where we're piecing together fragments, they left us detailed written records. The problem is that these records weren't discovered until relatively recently, and they completely reframe everything. In 1880, French archaeologist Gaston Maspero entered the pyramid of Unas at Saqqara, built around 2375 BC. What he found revolutionized our understanding of Egyptian religion. The burial chamber walls were covered floor to ceiling with hieroglyphic inscriptions, hundreds of spells, utterances, and religious formulas. These became known as the pyramid texts, the oldest religious writings in human history. Their content is staggering in its clarity. These are not vague symbolic references. They are explicit instructions for resurrection. Spell after spell describes the king's journey, his purification, his ascent to the sky, his transformation into a star, his union with the sun god Ra. One utterance declares, "The king appears as a star." Another states, "He flies up to the sky among his brothers the gods." This wasn't poetry. This was religious engineering. The text described the king's journey through the afterlife in precise theological detail. They identify him with Osiris, god of resurrection. They describe his ascent to join the circumpolar stars, the imperishable ones that never set below the horizon. They document his transformation from mortal flesh into Ek, a transfigured, luminous, eternal being. But here's what makes this evidence so powerful. The pyramid texts don't exist in isolation. When you examine the architecture of the pyramids themselves, built centuries before these texts were carved, you find that every element matches the theology described in the writings. The pyramid shape, the stellar shaft alignments, the western bank placement, the causeway and temple complex layout, the solar symbolism. The pyramids were built according to this religious blueprint long before anyone wrote it down explicitly. Consider the shape itself. The pyramid's triangular form represents the Benben, the primordial mound that rose from the waters of chaos at the beginning of creation in Egyptian cosmology. According to Heliopolitan theology, the sun god Atum emerged on this sacred mound, and from that elevated point creation began. And every pyramid recreates this first moment of cosmic birth. The structure isn't just a tomb, it's a symbolic recreation of creation itself, providing the pharaoh the same divine power of emergence. Or examine the internal shafts of the Great Pyramid. For decades, Egyptologists noted these narrow passages extending from the king's chamber, but couldn't explain their purpose. They don't lead anywhere functional. Then in the 1960s, astronomer Virginia Trimble conducted precise astronomical calculations. She discovered that the southern shaft aligns almost perfectly with Orion's belt as it appeared around 2500 BC. Orion was identified with Osiris, the god of resurrection and the afterlife. The northern shaft points towards the circumpolar stars that never set, symbols of eternity in Egyptian theology. But the pyramid wasn't just oriented toward these stars by coincidence. It was engineered as a celestial launch structure, designed to send the king's soul to join these eternal constellations. The pyramid texts would later confirm this explicitly. You shall reach the sky as Orion, your soul shall be as effective as a god. Even the location reveals religious intentionality. Every major pyramid complex from the Old Kingdom sits on the western bank of the Nile. This isn't random geography, it's sacred geography. In Egyptian religion, the west was the realm of the dead, where the sun set each evening and travelled through the underworld. The east was the land of the living, where the sun rose each morning. By placing pyramids on the west bank, Egyptian architects physically positioned the king in the realm of death and rebirth, aligned with the solar cycle of transformation. Records show that each pyramid complex included 4 ritual components: a valley temple at the Nile's edge, a long causeway ascending to the plateau, a mortuary temple at the pyramid's base, and the pyramid itself. This layout wasn't architectural preference, it mapped the journey of the deceased king. The body was purified at the Valley Temple, processed along the causeway in ceremonial ritual, received offerings at the mortuary temple to sustain the K life force, and underwent final transformation inside the pyramid. The entire complex functioned as a physical pathway from death to divine resurrection. By the 5th dynasty, around 2400 BC, solar theology increasingly dominated Egyptian religion. Yet the pharaoh became explicitly identified as the son of Ra, the sun god. The pyramids reflected this theology in their very surfaces. Originally covered in polished white Tura limestone, they would have reflected sunlight with blinding intensity across the desert. The pyramidion, the capstone at the apex, was often covered in gold or electrum. When complete, a pyramid would have appeared as a massive ray of frozen sunlight connecting earth to sky. This wasn't decorative choice, it was theological statement. The pyramid embodied the sun's transformative power. The king didn't just journey to the afterlife, he became light itself, merged with Ra's eternal solar cycle. The mathematics reinforced the sacred intent. The Great Pyramid demonstrates near-perfect cardinal alignment, oriented to true north within a fraction of a degree. The proportional relationships between height and base encode geometric precision that reflects Egyptian concepts of ma'at, cosmic order, balance, and harmony imposed upon chaos. The pyramid physically manifests divine order made visible in stone. This was theology expressed through geometry, sacred mathematics carved at monumental scale. Inscriptions indicate that the pyramid's name itself revealed its function. Khufu's pyramid was called Akhet Khufu, Horizon of Khufu. In Egyptian cosmology, the Akhet was the place where earth meets sky, where the sun rises and sets, where transformation between worlds occurs. The horizon was the threshold of rebirth. By naming the pyramid the King's Horizon, Egyptian theology declared its purpose. This structure was the king's point of cosmic transformation. Yet the Giza Plateau contains additional layers of religious meaning. The three main pyramids, Khufu, Khafra, and Menkore, align diagonally across the plateau. The Great Sphinx, with its lion body and human head, sits nearby, facing east toward the rising sun. Many scholars interpret the Sphinx as a solar guardian, potentially representing the pharaoh merged with solar power. At specific times of year, the sun sets precisely between Khufu and Khafra's pyramids, creating a hierophanic moment, a manifestation of the sacred through astronomical alignment. The entire plateau functions as an integrated religious landscape, a cosmic theatre where architecture, astronomy, and theology merge. Layers reveal that Egyptian religion understood the human being as composed of multiple spiritual components. Yet the Ka was the life force requiring sustenance through offerings. The Ba was the mobile personality that could travel between worlds. The Akh was the transfigured, luminous spirit, the ultimate form achieved through successful resurrection. The pyramid's design addressed each component, preserving the body for the Ka, enabling movement for the Ba, and facilitating transformation into Akh. This transformation doctrine unified every element we've examined. The creation symbolism of the pyramid shape, the stellar ascent through aligned shafts, the solar rebirth through reflective surfaces, the sacred geography of the West Bank, the ritual pathway of the complex, the cosmic mathematics of the structure itself. The religious code inside the pyramids was never hidden, never secret, never lost. It was written explicitly in the pyramid texts, encoded in architectural form, aligned with celestial phenomena, embedded in landscape placement, expressed through mathematical precision, performed through ritual action. The pyramids are not mysteries of vanished knowledge or lost civilizations. They are monuments to a civilization that documented its beliefs with extraordinary clarity, a civilization that believed so completely in cosmic order, divine transformation, and eternal life that they carved those convictions into the largest structures ever built. Chronologies indicate that this religious system developed and refined over centuries, From the step pyramid of Dejere around 2670 BC through the true pyramids of the 4th dynasty to the pyramid text inscriptions of the 5th and 6th dynasties, we can trace the evolution of Egyptian resurrection theology as it became increasingly elaborate and explicit. But the core belief remained constant. The pyramid was a machine of transformation. Stone enabling immortality, architecture conquering death. Now that we understand the religious framework, we can examine each element in detail, starting with the very shape of the pyramid and what it represented in Egyptian creation mythology. Before there was land, before there was sky, before there was anything, there was none. In Egyptian cosmology, none represented the infinite primordial waters, a dark, formless chaos that existed before creation began. Nothing lived in these waters, nothing could. They were pure potentiality, undifferentiated void, stretching endlessly in all directions. Then something extraordinary happened. Where from within this chaos a mound emerged, earth rose from the water, solid ground pushing upward through infinite liquid darkness. Upon this mound stood Atum, the self-created God, the first conscious being. From this elevated point, standing on the only solid matter in existence, Atum initiated creation. He spoke the other gods into being. He separated sky from earth. He transformed formless chaos into ordered cosmos. This mound had a name, the Ben-Ben. It was the first piece of creation, the foundation upon which everything else was built. The spot where it emerged became the most sacred location in Egyptian theology, the city of Heliopolis, city of the sun. There, in the temple of Ra, priests preserved what they claimed was the original Ben-Ben stone, an iconical or pyramidal rock that represented that primordial moment when order first conquered chaos. The Ben-Ben wasn't just symbolically important. In Egyptian thought, it contained actual creative power. It was the point where transformation became possible, where nothing became something, where chaos yielded to divine will. Touching the Ben-Ben meant touching the origin of existence itself. Now look at the pyramid's shape. The triangular form, rising from a square base to a pointed apex, directly recreates the Ben-Ben mound. But this isn't mere symbolic representation, it's theological recreation. By building a structure in this precise shape, Egyptian architects weren't creating a symbol of the primordial mound. They were manufacturing a new Ben-Ben, an artificial recreation of that first emergence from chaos. And the pyramid's sloping sides carried additional meaning. Ancient Egyptian texts describe these angles as representing the petrified rays of the sun, frozen beams of light descending from heaven to earth. When covered in polished white limestone, the pyramid's surface would have reflected sunlight so intensely that it appeared luminous, as if the structure itself generated light. This wasn't aesthetic accident, it was calculated theology. The pyramid became a visible manifestation of solar power, a permanent ray of divine light connecting the earthly realm to the heavens. The pyramidion, the capstone placed at the apex, concentrated this symbolism. Usually carved from granite or basalt and often covered in gold or electrum, this piece crowned the entire structure. Gold wasn't chosen for its monetary value, but for its solar properties. A gold doesn't tarnish. It maintains eternal brilliance. In Egyptian theology, gold was the flesh of the gods, particularly Ra. A gold-covered pyramidion meant the apex of the structure literally embodied solar divinity. When sunlight struck this golden cap, the pyramid became a beacon visible for miles across the desert, a manufactured sun ray planted in the earth, channeling celestial power downward to the king's chamber within. The theological implications are staggering. By placing the pharaoh's body inside a structure shaped like the benben, Egyptian religion positioned the king at the exact point where creation began. His death didn't occur in some random location. It occurred at the cosmic origin point. His resurrection wouldn't be an isolated miracle, it would be a reenactment of creation itself. The same process by which Atum transformed chaos into order. The king's transformation mirrored the universe's birth. Just as solid ground emerged from formless waters at the beginning of time, the king would emerge from death, transformed into eternal divine form. The pyramid facilitated this parallel by providing the same cosmological architecture that existed at creation's dawn. Death became rebirth through cosmological repetition. The pyramid didn't prevent death or preserve the body against decay. It positioned death as the necessary first step in recreation, chaos preceding order, darkness preceding light, mortality preceding divinity. This is why the pyramid's shape was non-negotiable. Other structures could serve as tombs. Only the benben form could serve as a resurrection machine, because only it recreated the precise cosmological conditions present when transformation first became possible. The pyramid isn't a grave. It's the first sunrise frozen in stone, the moment when light conquered darkness, captured in limestone and granite, standing as permanent testament to creation's power over void. But understanding the pyramid's shape explains only part of its function. The structure doesn't stand in isolation. It anchors an entire ritual complex, a carefully designed landscape that maps the soul's journey from death to divine transformation. To understand that journey, we must examine where the pyramids were built and why that location was theologically essential. The Nile doesn't just flow through Egypt, it defines Egyptian cosmology. For the ancient Egyptians, this river was the axis upon which the universe turned, dividing the world into two fundamentally different realms. On the eastern bank, where the sun rose each morning, lay the land of the living. Cities thrived there, crops grew, life flourished in the light. But on the western bank, where the sun descended each evening into darkness, lay the realm of the dead. This wasn't poetic metaphor, it was theological geography. The Nile separated existence into opposing cosmic zones, and crossing from east to west meant crossing from the world of the living into the domain of transformation and rebirth. The sunset wasn't simply the end of daylight, it was the sun god Ra beginning his nightly journey through the underworld, Duat, where he would battle chaos and emerge victorious at dawn. Every major pyramid complex from the Old Kingdom sits on the western bank. Giza, Saqqara, Dashur, Abusir, all positioned in the realm of the setting sun. This placement was theologically mandatory. The king's resurrection required him to enter the same realm Ra traversed each night, to participate in the same cosmic cycle of death and renewal that sustained the universe itself. But the pyramids don't stand alone on the west bank. Each one anchors an elaborate architectural complex that physically maps the journey from death to divinity. Understanding this layout reveals how Egyptian theology transformed abstract religious belief into navigable ritual space. The journey began at the Valley Temple, constructed at the edge of the Nile's floodplain. When the king died, his body arrived here by boat, crossing the river from the land of the living to the realm of transformation. inside the Valley Temple, the priests performed the initial purification rites, elaborate ceremonies involving natron salt, incense, sacred oils, and ritual recitations. These rites didn't simply clean the body, they initiated the separation of the king's spiritual components, beginning the process that would ultimately produce the AKH. From the Valley Temple, a covered causeway ascended toward the pyramid, sometimes stretching half a mile across the desert plateau. This wasn't a simple path. The causeway was a liminal space, a ritual corridor connecting the earthly realm below to the cosmic realm above. Processions moved along this passage carrying offerings, funerary equipment, and eventually the king's prepared body. The journey was ceremonial, measured, transformative. With each step along the causeway, the king moved further from mortal existence and closer to divine transformation. The causeway terminated at the mortuary temple, built directly against the pyramid's eastern face. This structure served as the eternal cult centre, where priests would perform daily rituals long after the king's burial. They brought offerings of food, drink and incense to sustain the king's K, his life force that required continuous nourishment even after physical death. These weren't symbolic gestures. Egyptian theology held that the Ka genuinely consumed the spiritual essence of these offerings, maintaining its existence through priestly service. The mortuary temple also contained chambers for storing ritual equipment and housing the priests who served the deceased king. Some temples included elaborate relief carvings depicting the king receiving offerings, engaged in ritual acts, or standing in the presence of the gods. These images weren't decorative. They were magically active, ensuring the rituals would continue eternally, even if human priests failed. From the mortuary temple, the final approach led into the pyramid itself. This last stage represented the ultimate ascent, the movement from earth towards sky. The internal passages often slope upward, physically enacting the theological concept of elevation toward the heavens. The burial chamber, positioned deep within the structure, or sometimes high above ground level, became the transformation point, the place where mortal remains would catalyse divine rebirth. Our archaeological evidence shows that pyramid complexes remained active for generations after the king's death. Priests maintained regular schedules of offerings. Administrative records document the allocation of resources to sustain these cults. Some pyramid temples continued functioning for centuries, receiving endowments from later pharaohs who sought to honour their predecessors and ensure cosmic stability. The entire complex, Valley Temple, Causeway, Mortuary Temple, Pyramid, functioned as an integrated ritual machine. Each component served a specific theological purpose, and together they transformed abstract beliefs about death and resurrection into tangible architectural form. The king's body travelled this path once during burial ceremonies, but his spiritual components would traverse it repeatedly, eternally. A moving between the earthly realm where offerings were received and the celestial realm where his transformed ark dwelled among the gods. The pyramid complex is a map of the soul's journey, rendered in stone and oriented toward the cosmos. Its theology made walkable, belief made buildable. Every architectural element, from the western bank placement to the ascending causeway to the pyramid's internal chambers, reflects Egyptian understanding of how transformation occurs, where it happens, and what structures facilitate the process. But this journey doesn't end at the pyramid's burial chamber. The complex points upward for a reason. The soul's destination lies beyond the stone, beyond the desert, beyond even the earth itself. The journey leads to the sky, to specific stars that held profound religious meaning in Egyptian theology. Egyptian priests were astronomers. They tracked celestial movements with remarkable precision, not for scientific curiosity, but for theological necessity. The night sky wasn't a distant backdrop to earthly life. It was the realm where the gods dwelled, where eternal existence became possible, where the transformed king would spend eternity. The Egyptians divided the heavens into distinct zones, each with specific religious significance. The most important were the circumpolar stars, constellations that circle the celestial North Pole without ever dipping below the horizon. Night after night, year after year, these stars remain perpetually visible, never rising, never setting, turning endlessly around the polar axis. The Egyptians called them the Ikemu Sek, the imperishable ones, or the unwearying stars. These stars represented eternal life in its purest form, while other constellations rose and set, appearing and disappearing with the seasons. The circumpolar stars remained constant. They never died. They never descended into the underworld. They simply existed forever in the northern sky. This was the immortality Egyptian theology promised the pharaoh. Not resurrection into temporary life, but transformation into eternal, unwearying existence. But the circumpolar region wasn't the only celestial destination. The constellation Orion, called Sarh in Egyptian, held equally profound significance. Unlike the circumpolar stars, Orion rises in the east and sets in the west, following the same daily pattern as the sun. Egyptian theology identified Orion with Osiris, the god of death and resurrection, the divine king who was murdered, dismembered, reassembled, and reborn as lord of the afterlife. When the pharaoh died, he didn't simply join Osiris, he became Osiris. The king's transformation mirrored Osiris's resurrection, and his celestial destination was Orion, where he would dwell eternally as the stellar form of the god of rebirth. Nearby in the sky travels Sirius, the brightest star visible from Earth, known to Egyptians as Sopdet. They identified this star with Isis, Osiris's divine wife, and the goddess whose magical power reassembled Osiris after his destruction. Sirius's annual disappearance and reappearance in the pre-dawn sky coincided with the Nile's flooding, the event that brought fertility to Egypt. This astronomical cycle reinforced the star's association with rebirth and renewal. The pyramid's architecture reflects this stellar theology with stunning precision. Inside the Great Pyramid, narrow shafts extend from both the King's Chamber and the Queen's Chamber, angling upward through hundreds of feet of solid stone. For decades, archaeologists assumed these were ventilation shafts, but they don't reach the pyramid's exterior, and they're too narrow to provide meaningful airflow. In the 1960s, astronomer Virginia Trimble calculated the shaft's astronomical alignments as they would have appeared around 2500 BC when the pyramid was built. Her findings revealed their true purpose. The southern shaft from the King's Chamber points directly at Orion's belt, the three stars forming the centre of the Osiris constellation. The northern shaft aims toward the circumpolar region, specifically towards stars that never set. These aren't approximate alignments. The precision is remarkable, achieved through careful surveying and astronomical observation. The shafts function as fixed sight lines, creating permanent geometric connections between the king's burial chamber and specific stellar destinations. The entire pyramid demonstrates astronomical precision, Its four sides align almost perfectly with the cardinal directions: north, south, east, west. The accuracy approaches a fraction of a single degree, an achievement requiring sophisticated surveying techniques and astronomical knowledge. This orientation wasn't arbitrary. True north pointed towards the celestial pole, the axis around which the imperishable ones eternally circled. The theological meaning becomes clear, as the pyramid creates a physical pathway from earth to sky. The burial chamber sits at the intersection of these stellar alignments, positioned precisely where earthly and celestial realms connect. The shafts aren't metaphorical, they're geometric vectors, engineered trajectories designed to guide the king's bier and arc toward their stellar destinations. Texts from later periods confirm this astronomical theology. Inscriptions describe the deceased king ascending through the sky, climbing a celestial ladder, or riding upon beams of sunlight to reach the stars. They declare, "He treads on the light, and the king appears as a star." These aren't poetic flourishes, they're descriptions of the journey the pyramid's architecture was engineered to facilitate. The king's resurrection involved joining two stellar realms. As Osiris, he merged with Orion, participating in the constellation's daily cycle of rising and setting. Simultaneously, his transformed AKH ascended to the circumpolar stars, achieving the unwearying eternal existence they represented. The pyramid's dual shaft system addresses both destinations, creating pathways to both eternal cycling and absolute permanence. The pyramid becomes a cosmic launch structure, a precisely calibrated machine designed to project the king's spiritual essence into specific celestial locations. It's not enough for the structure to point generally skyward. It must align with exact stellar positions, creating geometric correspondence between the king's earthly remains and his divine celestial destinations. This is resurrection through astronomical engineering. The pyramid doesn't just symbolize ascent, it architecturally enables it, creating the geometric conditions necessary for the soul to navigate from Earth to the realm of the imperishable ones. Eventually, this astronomical theology stopped being implied through architectural alignment and became explicit through written declaration. The walls themselves would speak, carved with the exact words the king needed to complete his stellar transformation. For centuries, the Great Pyramid and its companions at Giza remained silent. Their internal chambers contained no inscriptions, no carved reliefs, no written explanations of their purpose. The architecture spoke through geometry and alignment, but the theology remained unwritten, implied rather than declared. That changed with the 5th dynasty. Around 2375 BC, Pharaoh Unas built his pyramid at Saqqara, substantially smaller than the Giza monuments, but revolutionary in one critical aspect. When priests sealed his burial chamber after the king's death, the walls were covered floor to ceiling with columns of hieroglyphic text. For the first time, the religious purpose of the pyramid was carved directly into stone. These inscriptions became known as the Pyramid Texts, the oldest substantial religious writings in human history. They predate the Sumerian and Akkadian literature, the Vedic hymns, the Hebrew scriptures. Nothing written before them survives, and nothing written after them matches their theological directness. They are humanity's first preserved attempt to document the process of conquering death. The French archaeologist Gaston Maspero entered Unas's pyramid in 1880, expecting another empty chamber like those at Giza. Instead, he found walls transformed into sacred manuscripts. The hieroglyphs covered every available surface, corridors, chambers, even ceilings, creating an immersive textual environment surrounding the king's sarcophagus. Subsequent excavations revealed similar inscriptions in the pyramids of Teti, Pepi I, Pepi II, and other 6th dynasty rulers. Combined, these texts contain nearly 800 distinct utterances, individual spells, invocations, and ritual formulas. The content is staggering. These aren't vague prayers or general appeals to divine mercy. They're precise instructions spoken in the king's voice, declaring his transformation step by step. The texts describe his awakening after death, and his purification, his ascent through multiple celestial realms, and his ultimate merger with the gods. One utterance declares, "The king flies up as a falcon, he alights as a scarab beetle." Another proclaims, "You are this great star, the companion of Orion, who traverses the sky with Orion, who navigates the Duat with Osiris." The king isn't asking to join the stars, he's announcing that he has already joined them, that his transformation is accomplished, that his divine status is established fact. The texts explicitly address the king's identification with Osiris. Numerous utterances declare, "You are Osiris," equating the deceased pharaoh with the god of resurrection. This wasn't metaphorical association. In Egyptian theology, the king literally became Osiris upon death, inheriting the god's power over the afterlife and his eternal existence among the stars. The utterances describe the king's body being reassembled just as Osiris's scattered remains were gathered by Isis, emphasizing resurrection as physical reconstitution leading to divine transformation. Other passages focus on stellar ascent. The texts describe the king climbing a ladder to heaven, ascending on rays of sunlight, or being lifted by divine beings. One utterance states, "A ladder to the sky is set up for me that I may ascend on it to the sky." Another declares, "The sky has strengthened the rays of the sun for you, that you may lift yourself to the sky as the eye of Ra." The transformation into Ach, the transfigured spirit, receives particular emphasis. The texts distinguish this from mere survival after death. The Ach is luminous, a powerful, eternal. It possesses divine knowledge and moves freely between earthly and celestial realms. Achieving AKH status represents the successful completion of the resurrection process, the ultimate goal toward which all pyramid theology aimed. Many utterances invoke solar union, describing the king joining Ra's daily journey across the sky and through the underworld. Ra takes you to himself to the sky, one text declares. The king doesn't simply worship Ra, he merges with the sun god's essence, participating in the eternal solar cycle that sustains cosmic order. Each dawn becomes the king's rebirth, repeated eternally. The texts also reveal the active role of priestly recitation. These weren't meant to be read silently. They were spoken aloud during burial ceremonies and potentially during ongoing mortuary rituals. The utterances often address the king directly. "Awake, O king! Stand up, O king! Receive your head, collect your bones, gather your limbs together." The words themselves possessed transformative power, activating the resurrection process through ritual speech. What makes the pyramid texts historically invaluable is their explicit documentation of beliefs that earlier pyramids expressed only through architecture. The stellar shaft alignments at Giza make sense only after reading, "You are this great star, the companion of Orion." The Benben shape becomes comprehensible after encountering texts describing the king standing on the primordial mound. The western bank placement gains meaning through utterances about journeying to the realm where the sun sets. The religious code is no longer implied, it's written in thousands of hieroglyphs. The pyramid exists to transform a king into a god. This isn't scholarly interpretation or archaeological speculation. It's what the Egyptians themselves declared, carved into stone in the oldest religious literature humanity possesses. But reading the texts reveals something else. Resurrection isn't only stellar. The utterances give equal emphasis to solar transformation, to the king becoming light itself, merging not just with distant stars, but with the sun that illuminates the world each day. The pyramid serves both destinies simultaneously, stellar permanence and solar renewal. During the 5th dynasty, Egyptian theology underwent a decisive shift. The sun god Ra, already important in earlier periods, moved to absolute dominance. Pharaohs began incorporating Ra into their throne names as a standard practice. Userkaf, the dynasty's founder, built the first dedicated solar temple at Abu Ghurab around 2445 BC, a structure designed solely for worshipping the sun, separate from any funerary function. These solar temples reveal the centrality of sun worship in 5th dynasty religion. Instead of enclosed chambers, they featured open-air courtyards centered on a massive stone benben, often called an obelisk, that captured and concentrated sunlight. Priests performed daily rituals synchronized with the sun's movement, offering incense and sacrifices as Ra travelled across the sky. Subsequent pharaohs, Sahure, Nefererkare, and Nusere, each built their own solar temples, creating a network of sites dedicated to tracking and venerating the sun's cosmic power. The pharaoh's title evolved to reflect this solar emphasis, but he became son of Ra officially, cementing his identity as the earthly manifestation of solar divinity. This wasn't honorary kingship, it was theological fact. The king's legitimacy derived from his direct descent from the sun god. His authority to rule came from embodying Ra's cosmic order on earth. His death didn't sever this connection, it completed it, allowing the king to merge fully with his divine father. This solar theology fundamentally altered how pyramids functioned. They remained resurrection machines, but the emphasis shifted from purely stellar ascent towards solar unification. The pyramid needed to interact with sunlight physically, visibly demonstrating the king's merger with Ra's eternal radiance. The architectural response was the casing stones. The Great Pyramid and its companions were originally covered in polished Tura limestone, a fine white stone quarried from the eastern cliffs across the Nile. Workers fitted these casing blocks with extraordinary precision, creating nearly seamless joints. The outer surface was then polished until it achieved mirror-like reflectivity. When complete, the pyramid didn't merely catch sunlight, it blazed with it. Ancient accounts describe the structures as blindingly bright, visible from vast distances across the desert. The reflected light was so intense that observers couldn't look directly at the pyramid's surface during midday. The structure appeared to generate its own luminosity, as if the stone itself contained trapped sunlight. This wasn't decorative enhancement, it was theological necessity. The pyramid had to visibly manifest solar power, demonstrating through reflected brilliance that it functioned as a conduit for Ra's energy. The king inside wasn't merely buried in stone, He was encased in captured light, surrounded by the same radiance that filled the heavens. The pyramidion amplified this effect. This capstone, positioned at the pyramid's apex, was typically carved from granite or basalt and covered with gold or electrum, a naturally occurring gold-silver alloy. Gold served crucial symbolic purposes beyond its material value. It represented divine flesh, particularly Ra's incorruptible body. More importantly, gold never tarnishes. It maintains perpetual brilliance, never dimming, never degrading, eternal luminosity made physical. When sunlight struck the golden pyramidion, the entire structure became a beacon. Where the apex blazed like a second sun, while the white limestone sides reflected light across the plateau. The pyramid appeared as a massive ray of sunlight frozen in geometric form, a permanent beam connecting earth to sky. Egyptian texts support this interpretation. Later inscriptions describe pyramids as rays of the sun, using language that treats the architectural form as literally solar rather than symbolically solar. The pyramid doesn't represent a sunbeam. It is one, engineered through stone and geometry to perform the same function as actual light. This solar identity served the king's transformation, just as the sun dies each evening in the west and resurrects each morning in the east. The pharaoh's death initiated a cyclical process of perpetual renewal. Yet the pyramid facilitated his merger with Ra's daily journey, descending into the underworld at sunset, battling the chaos serpent Apophis through the night, and emerging victorious at dawn. The king's resurrection wasn't a single event. It was eternal repetition, daily rebirth synchronized with the sun's cosmic cycle. Each sunrise represented the king's renewed divine existence, his continuous triumph over death mirrored in Ra's continuous triumph over darkness. The pyramid serves dual cosmic functions simultaneously. Its stellar shaft alignments connect the king to Orion and the circumpolar stars, eternal, unchanging, permanent existence among the imperishable ones. Its solar architecture connects him to Ra's daily cycle, eternal renewal, continuous transformation, perpetual resurrection through light. These aren't competing theologies. They're integrated systems. The king achieves both stellar permanence and solar renewal, both unwavering existence and continuous rebirth. The pyramid accommodates both destinies through carefully calibrated architecture that addresses stellar navigation and solar interaction simultaneously. The structure is both star stairway and sunray, both cosmic ladder and frozen light, a machine designed to merge the king with multiple divine systems at once, ensuring his immortality through every available theological mechanism. But this theological precision required more than symbolic correspondence. The pyramid's effectiveness depended on mathematical exactitude, on geometric relationships that physically manifested cosmic order. The architecture couldn't approximate divine proportions. It had to embody them with measurable accuracy. Yet the Great Pyramid's four sides aligned the cardinal directions with astonishing precision: north, south, east, west. Modern surveys using advanced instruments have measured the accuracy. The error amounts to roughly 3 arc minutes, or 1/20th of a single degree. Achieving this precision required sophisticated astronomical observation, careful surveying and meticulous construction across a base covering 13 acres. This wasn't approximate orientation, it was geometric perfection, pursued with religious intensity. The pyramid had to align precisely because imprecision meant theological failure. The structure was encoding cosmic order through measurable accuracy, transforming abstract religious concepts into verifiable mathematical relationships. The Egyptians had a word for this cosmic order, ma'at. The concept encompasses truth, balance, harmony, justice and proper arrangement, the fundamental ordering principle that prevents the universe from collapsing back into primordial chaos. Ma'at wasn't merely ethical or philosophical, it was the actual structure of reality, the divine pattern that separated cosmos from void. The pharaoh's central responsibility was maintaining Ma'at. His rituals, his judgments, his very existence as divine intermediary sustained universal balance. When he died, cosmic order faced potential disruption. His resurrection became necessary not just for his personal immortality, but for the universe's continued stability. The pyramid facilitated this resurrection by physically manifesting Ma'at in architectural form. Every measurement embodies this principle. The Great Pyramid's base forms a nearly perfect square, with sides measuring approximately 230 metres. The proportional relationship between base length and height produces specific geometric ratios that ancient Egyptian architects clearly understood and intentionally employed. These aren't accidental proportions, they're calculated expressions of mathematical harmony. The pyramid's slope angle, approximately 52 degrees, creates a precise relationship between the structure's height and perimeter. Some researchers have noted that this ratio approximates the relationship between a circle's radius and circumference, encoded in 3 dimensions through sloping triangular faces. Whether Egyptian architects understood this mathematically or achieved it through practical geometry, the result demonstrates sophisticated mathematical thinking applied to religious architecture. The orientation to true north required astronomical skill. Determining true north without magnetic compasses demands careful observation of stellar movement, particularly the circumpolar stars that rotate around the celestial pole. Egyptian architects likely used the simultaneous transit method, tracking stars as they crossed a vertical line at specific moments, then calculating the precise northern direction from these observations. This astronomical determination of orientation served theological purposes beyond simple directional alignment. True north pointed toward the celestial pole, the axis around which the imperishable ones eternally circled. By aligning the pyramid to this axis, architects created geometric correspondence between the earthly structure and the heavenly realm where the king's ark would dwell eternally. The pyramid's form itself expressed cosmic structure. The square base represented the earth, stable, four-cornered, grounded in physical reality. The 4 triangular faces converged at a single point above, creating the apex that symbolized heaven, the singular divine realm toward which all earthly existence ultimately points. The pyramid functioned as an axis mundi, a world axis connecting terrestrial and celestial realms, providing the geometric pathway between earth and sky. This vertical axis wasn't metaphorical. The pyramid's internal passages often slope upward, physically enacting the concept of ascent. The king's chamber sits positioned along this vertical geometry, placing his body at the precise intersection of horizontal, earthly plane and vertical celestial axis. The architecture creates the cosmological position necessary for transformation, grounded in earth, while reaching toward heaven. The construction itself demonstrated Ma'at through organisational precision, moving 2,300,000 stone blocks required extraordinary logistical coordination, quarrying, transporting, shaping and placing each element demanded systematic planning, hierarchical organisation and sustained collective effort. The successful completion of such massive projects proved Egyptian civilization's ability to impose order on massive scale, to transform chaotic raw materials into harmonious geometric perfection. The smooth white limestone casing that once covered the pyramid added another layer of geometric perfection. The nearly seamless surface created an unbroken plane, eliminating the visual chaos of individual blocks. The pyramid appeared as pure geometric form, triangle made manifest, mathematical ideal realized in 3 dimensions. This geometric purity reflected divine order. Just as Ma'at eliminated chaos from the cosmos, the pyramid's perfect form eliminated disorder from its physical structure. Every precisely cut joint, every accurately measured angle, every carefully aligned face demonstrated order, triumphing over randomness, pattern conquering formlessness. The pyramid is Ma'at made visible, cosmic order carved at monumental scale. It's not merely a structure built according to geometric principles. It's theology expressed through mathematics, divine balance manifested through measurable relationships. The precision isn't aesthetic preference, it's religious necessity. And the pyramid works as a resurrection machine because its geometry embodies the same cosmic order that governs the universe itself. But individual pyramids, regardless of their geometric perfection, don't stand in isolation. The Giza Plateau contains 3 major pyramids, multiple smaller pyramids, temples, causeways, and the Great Sphinx, all positioned according to deliberate spatial relationships. To understand the full scope of pyramid theology, we must step back from individual structures and examine how they function together as an integrated sacred landscape. The 3 main pyramids at Giza, Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure, don't form a straight line. They're offset diagonally across the plateau, creating a deliberate spatial arrangement that modern surveys have mapped precisely. Yet this layout wasn't dictated by terrain limitations or construction convenience. The plateau offered ample space for symmetrical placement. The diagonal configuration was intentional, designed to create specific visual and theological relationships. Standing at certain vantage points on the plateau, these spatial relationships produce remarkable effects. At specific times during the year, the setting sun descends precisely into the space between Khufu and Khafre's pyramids. This solar alignment creates what scholars call a hierophany, a manifestation of the sacred through natural phenomena enhanced by architectural positioning. The sun doesn't simply set behind the pyramids, it appears to crown them, creating a brief moment when the structures frame solar divinity. This wasn't accidental positioning. Egyptian architects understood solar movement across the year and positioned monuments to interact with specific celestial events. The hierophany reinforced the pyramid's solar theology, demonstrating through visible astronomical alignment that these structures participated in cosmic cycles rather than simply representing them. The Great Sphinx adds another layer to the plateau's integrated design. Carved from the natural limestone bedrock, this massive sculpture features a lion's body and a human head, generally identified with Pharaoh Khafre. The Sphinx faces due east, gazing directly toward the sunrise point on the horizon, its position isn't random. It's positioned as a solar guardian, watching the daily resurrection of Ra as the sun emerges from the underworld. The lion form carries specific solar symbolism. Lions represented strength, sovereignty, and solar power in Egyptian iconography. The human head identified the guardian specifically with the pharaoh, merging royal and solar identities in a single monumental form. The Sphinx functioned as eternal sentinel, maintaining perpetual vigilance over the threshold where night becomes day, darkness transforms into light. The relationship between temples and horizon reveals deeper theological meaning. The Egyptian word akhet means horizon, specifically the place where sky meets earth, where the sun rises and sets, where transformation between realms occurs. The horizon wasn't simply a visual boundary, it was a sacred threshold, the cosmic location where change becomes possible, where one state of existence transitions into another. Khufu's pyramid bore the name Akhet Khufu, Horizon of Khufu, or Khufu's place of transformation. This naming was theologically precise. The pyramid functioned as the king's personal horizon, his designated threshold between mortal existence and divine immortality. Just as the sun undergoes daily transformation at the horizon, dying in the west and resurrecting in the east, the king would undergo permanent transformation at his architectural horizon. The plateau's eastern location relative to the pyramids reinforced this symbolism. The mortuary temples sat on the pyramid's eastern faces, positioned toward the rising sun. Daily rituals performed in these temples synchronized with dawn, the moment when Ra emerged victorious from the underworld. The king merged with solar theology, participated in this daily resurrection through ongoing priestly service. The entire plateau functions as a unified religious landscape, not separate monuments, but an integrated cosmic stage where architecture, astronomy, and theology converge. Each element serves the overall purpose of facilitating royal transformation through multiple simultaneous mechanisms. The pyramids provide resurrection architecture. The temples enable ritual maintenance. The causeways create processional pathways. The Sphinx guards the solar threshold. The spatial arrangement produces astronomical alignments. The Western Bank location places everything in the realm of death and rebirth. The diagonal layout creates visual hierophanies. The horizon position frames cosmic transformation. This integration demonstrates sophisticated religious thinking. Egyptian theology didn't compartmentalize different aspects of resurrection. It synthesized them, creating architectural systems where stellar ascent, solar merger, cosmic order, ritual performance, and geographical symbolism all operated simultaneously, each reinforcing the others. Modern visitors see three pyramids standing near each other. Ancient Egyptians saw a sacred theatre of resurrection, a carefully designed cosmic stage where divine transformation occurred through architectural, astronomical, ritual, and theological means working in perfect coordination. The plateau wasn't built incrementally without overall planning. The spatial relationships, the astronomical alignments, the integrated temple complexes, the Sphinx's positioning, all evidence suggests conceptual unity underlying the construction across multiple reigns. Each pharaoh added to an evolving sacred landscape designed according to consistent theological principles. Giza represents the apex of Old Kingdom pyramid theology, the fullest expression of resurrection architecture ever attempted. Later periods would build smaller pyramids, refine the pyramid texts, develop more elaborate funerary customs, but they would never again create a landscape that so completely integrated every aspect of transformation theology into unified architectural form. The plateau is more than the sum of its monuments. It's a physical manifestation of Egyptian religious conviction, the belief that death can be conquered, that mortal kings can become eternal gods, that properly designed architecture can facilitate cosmic transformation. At the centre of this elaborate system, underlying every architectural choice and theological mechanism, stands one fundamental belief that drove Egyptian civilization for millennia: transformation. Not survival after death, not preservation of memory, but actual metamorphosis from one state of being into another, from mortal to divine, from temporary to eternal, from earthly to cosmic. Egyptian theology understood the human being as fundamentally composite, not a single unified soul, but multiple distinct spiritual components that required different treatment after death. The K represented life force, the animating energy that distinguished the living from the dead. It required continuous sustenance through food offerings, which priests delivered daily to the mortuary temple. The Ka didn't consume physical substance, but absorbed the spiritual essence of bread, beer, as a meat placed before it. The Be represented personality and mobility, the aspect of identity that could move between worlds. Artistic depictions show the Be as a human-headed bird, emphasizing its ability to fly from the tomb to the world above, visiting familiar places and receiving offerings. The Bayar maintained individual consciousness, remembering earthly life while navigating the afterlife realm. But the ultimate goal wasn't preserving Ka or enabling Ba movement. It was achieving AKH status, transformation into a transfigured, luminous, eternal being. The AKH represented successful completion of the resurrection process, the king's metamorphosis from mortal into divine. Pyramid texts describe the AKH as radiant, powerful, equipped with divine knowledge, capable of dwelling among the gods. Yet this wasn't metaphorical spirituality. It was literal transformation into a different category of existence. The pyramid's architecture addressed each component systematically. The burial chamber and sarcophagus protected the physical body, which the Ka required as its earthly anchor. The mortuary temple provided the location where offerings sustained the Ka eternally. The internal passages and shafts enabled Be movement, creating pathways between the burial chamber and the external world. The stellar alignments and solar architecture facilitated AKH transformation, providing the cosmic connections necessary for divine metamorphosis. Every element we've examined serves this unified purpose. The Benben's shape recreates the primordial mound where creation first occurred, positioning the king's transformation at the same cosmic location where order originally conquered chaos. The stellar shaft alignments connect him to Orion and the circumpolar stars, providing pathways to join Osiris and the imperishable ones. The solar architecture merges him with Ra's daily cycle of death and rebirth, ensuring perpetual renewal synchronized with cosmic order. The Western Bank placement positions the transformation in the realm where the sun dies each evening, making the king's resurrection parallel Ra's nightly journey through the underworld. The pyramid complex layout, valley temple, causeway, mortuary temple, pyramid, maps the soul's ritual journey from earthly death to celestial divinity. The cardinal orientation and geometric precision embody ma'ats, demonstrating that the transformation occurs within divine order rather than chaotic uncertainty. The Giza Plateau integrates these elements into unified sacred landscape. The three pyramids create astronomical alignments and solar hierophanies. The Sphinx guards the eastern threshold where sunrise occurs. The entire arrangement functions as cosmic theatre, where transformation happens through coordinated architectural, astronomical, and ritual mechanisms. The pyramid texts synthesize centuries of architectural theology into explicit written formulas. They declare what the pyramids already demonstrated through structure. You shall ascend to the sky among the imperishable stars. You are this great star, the companion of Orion. Ra takes you to himself to the sky. The king doesn't hope for resurrection. He commands it, speaking the words that activate his transformation from mortal pharaoh to eternal Och. The religious code was never hidden. It was never secret. It was never lost. It was documented with extraordinary clarity through multiple simultaneous systems. It was written in architecture, pyramid shapes recreating cosmic creation, chambers positioned at celestial intersections, complexes mapping soul journeys. It was written in astronomy, shafts aligned to Orion and circumpolar stars, orientations fixed to true north, structures positioned for solar hierophanies. It was written in ritual, purification ceremonies in valley temples, processional journeys along causeways, daily offerings sustaining the Ka, recited spells activating transformation. It was written in language, pyramid texts carved into stone, hieroglyphic declarations of divine status, names like Akhet Khufu, revealing theological purpose. It was written in landscape, western bank placement in the realm of death, proximity to the Nile's cosmic axis, plateau arrangements creating integrated sacred geography. It was written in light, polished limestone reflecting solar brilliance, golden pyramidions capturing divine radiance, structures becoming visible manifestations of celestial power. The pyramids are not mysteries of lost knowledge or evidence of vanished civilizations possessing forgotten technology. They are monuments to a civilization that documented its beliefs with meticulous precision. A civilization that believed so profoundly in certain theological truths that it invested centuries of labour and resources into carving those truths into the largest architectural statements ever created. They believed order triumphs over chaos, demonstrated through geometric precision and mathematical exactitude that imposed divine pattern onto massive stone construction. They believed light triumphs over darkness, demonstrated through solar theology, reflective surfaces, and daily rituals synchronized with Ra's cosmic victory over the underworld. They believed death is not an end, but transformation, demonstrated through every architectural choice, every astronomical alignment, every ritual performance designed to facilitate the king's metamorphosis from mortal to eternal, from earthly to divine, from temporary to permanent. Picture the sun rising over the Great Pyramid this morning, just as it did 4,500 years ago, when the structure blazed with polished white limestone, when the golden pyramidion captured the first light of dawn, when priests in the mortuary temple performed rituals welcoming Ra's daily resurrection. The pyramid still stands, the sun still rises, the theology remains readable for anyone willing to examine the evidence. The religious code is still there, carved in geometry and lined with stars, waiting not to be discovered, but simply to be understood.